Hey there, lovely soul. Welcome back to Noah's Stories. Have you ever felt like your life was perfectly designed, but not truly yours? Today's story will take you on a journey through control, sacrifice, and ultimately, freedom. So settle in, breathe deep, and let's begin the story of Ava Whitmore. Ava Whitmore had never known freedom. Born into the glittering heights of Manhattan's elite, her life was measured in appearances, silence, and sacrifice. She lived in a penthouse that overlooked the city, a skyline most dreamed of, yet every window felt like another bar in her golden cage. Everything around her was perfect, but nothing belonged to her. Not her choices, not her time, not even her name. As the only daughter of Ethan Whitmore, the media mogul behind Whitmore Global News, Ava had been raised like an heirloom, preserved, protected, and prepared. Groomed to speak only when spoken to walk like royalty and smile like she didn't know what it meant to cry. Her father had crafted her image for the world to see, the poised, flawless daughter of American media's king. But behind closed doors, Ava was anything but serene. At 25, she had never been kissed without permission, never been held without expectation. Her calendar was planned down to the minute, her public appearances choreographed like theater, her future already written, a future tied to mergers, alliances, and influence, one that had nothing to do with what she wanted. She didn't dream anymore. She just existed, beautiful, obedient, invisible. And then came the night her father walked into her room without knocking, his face pale, eyes heavy, the weight of failure clinging to his shoulders like a storm cloud. "You're getting married, Ava," he said, voice hollow. "We don't have a choice." Ava didn't speak. She didn't move. But deep down, she already knew. Something inside her had just been sold. The silence between them was suffocating. Ava stared at her father, searching for some trace of regret in his eyes, but found only exhaustion, a man who had gambled and lost. Ethan Whitmore, once untouchable, now stood before her with his empire in ruins. Scandals had gutted the company, investors had pulled out, and the press, the very beast he had once tamed, was now feasting on his downfall. And she knew. This marriage wasn't about love. It was about survival. "Julian Blackwell has agreed," he finally muttered, unable to meet her gaze. The name struck her like ice. Julian Blackwell, founder and CEO of Blackwell Capital, a corporate predator in the world of media takeovers. His face had been on the cover of every major business publication, his name whispered in fear in boardrooms across the city. Sharp suits, sharper words, and a smile that never quite reached his eyes. Ruthless, relentless, and entirely untouchable. Ava had met him once, briefly, 2 years ago at a charity gala. He had offered her a drink. She had politely declined. He had smiled like he already owned her. And now he would... "The wedding is this weekend," her father said, almost apologetically. "It's the only way to keep the company from collapsing entirely. He'll take on the debt in exchange for you." In exchange for you. As if she were nothing more than a signature, a body, a last bargaining chip. Ava said nothing, her voice felt locked in her throat. She wasn't being married, she was being transferred. Her future sealed in a contract inked by desperation and greed. In 72 hours, she would no longer be Ava Whitmore. She would become Mrs. Julian Blackwell. And everything she had once dreamed of, freedom, love, a life of her own, would disappear the moment she said, "I do." The wedding was as cold as the contract behind it. No flowers, no music, no vows spoken from the heart. Only signatures scrawled on crisp paper, a room full of silent suits, and a bride in ivory who never once looked up. Ava wore a dress she hadn't chosen, smiled for photographs she hadn't agreed to, walked down an aisle not toward love, but toward obligation. By sunset, it was over. No reception, no celebration, just a sleek black car waiting to take her away, from one prison to another. Julian Blackwell's penthouse loomed over Central Park like a fortress of glass and steel, its windows glowing faintly under the night sky. The driver opened the door without a word. Ava stepped out like a ghost. The door to the master bedroom clicked shut behind her. It was vast, dark, minimalist, like him. Then she heard it. Footsteps behind her, steady, controlled. Julian entered, shrugging off his jacket, loosening his tie, the air shifting with his presence. He didn't speak at first, just looked at her, like she was something he'd already paid for, something that now belonged to him. "You really thought you'd sleep alone tonight?" he asked, voice low, smooth, cutting through the stillness. Ava took an instinctive step back, but her spine met the cold wall behind her. Julian moved forward, slow, deliberate, not rushing, not violent, just certain. His gaze held her there, unmoving, trapped. "You're my wife, Ava," he murmured, "and I always claim what's mine." Her heart pounded in her chest, her breath caught somewhere between fear and something more dangerous, curiosity, confusion, the betrayal of her own body reacting to the man she was supposed to hate. She should have screamed, fought, run, but she didn't. And when his hands touched her, she didn't stop him. What terrified her most wasn't his power. It was her response. The morning after felt like a fog she couldn't shake. Ava lay still beneath the pristine white sheets, the air heavy with silence. The ache in her body wasn't what unsettled her, it was the strange, suffocating emptiness blooming inside her chest. The ghost of his touch lingered on her skin, his scent clung to the pillow beside her, and though Julian was no longer in the room, he was everywhere. She pulled the covers closer, trembling from a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. She should hate him, should loathe the man who had taken her without tenderness, without permission. But what terrified her the most was herself. She hadn't pushed him away. And worse, she had responded. The days that followed blurred into quiet confusion. Julian didn't touch her again. He didn't demand, didn't command. Instead, he stayed close, always just at the edge of her awareness. When she woke, breakfast was already waiting, toast perfectly crisp, fruit sliced with delicate care, and a cup of Earl Grey steeped for exactly 3 minutes. She stared at it one morning, frowning. "You made this?" Julian, seated across from her in a pressed black shirt, simply nodded. "You're my wife," he said. "Who else would take better care of you?" There was no smile on his face, no arrogance, just a quiet certainty, as if it was the most natural thing in the world. Later that week, when a storm rolled in and the wind knocked over a potted plant on the terrace, Julian appeared without a word. He wrapped a coat over her shoulders before she even realized she was cold. When she pulled away from him, he didn't stop her, just watched, with something unreadable in his eyes. And one night, when a sudden fever left her shivering in bed, Julian never left her side. He held her hand, pressed cool cloths to her burning skin, and whispered things she couldn't remember the next morning. But she remembered the way he looked at her. Not like a prize, but like something breakable, precious. And for the first time, Ava found herself wondering, was he always this man? Or was she the only one he'd ever let the mask fall for? The phone call came just after breakfast. Julian's jaw tightened the moment he answered. Ava watched from across the room, the tension radiating off him in thick waves. She couldn't make out all the words, but what she heard was enough. "No, that's not happening," he snapped. "She's not going anywhere." He ended the call with a sharp thud of the phone against the table, eyes dark, unreadable. "Your father," he said flatly. "He's hired a legal team. He wants you back." Ava's breath caught in her throat. "Isn't our contract enough?" she asked quietly. Julian let out a cold, bitter laugh. "Ethan Whitmore thinks he can undo what's been done. He forgets you're not his anymore." Before she could respond, Julian was already moving. "We're going to him." The ride to the Whitmore Tower was silent. When they stepped into the boardroom, her father stood waiting. Thinner than she remembered, but no less commanding. His eyes flickered when they landed on her. "Ava," he said, voice low, "you don't have to stay with him. Come home." Julian's grip on her waist tightened. "She's not leaving." Ethan turned to him, tone sharpening. That contract can be dissolved. I'll fight until it is." Julian smirked, tugging Ava closer. "She's not a possession for you to reclaim." Then he leaned toward her ear, his voice almost a whisper. "Tell him." Ava's heart pounded. Both men were staring at her, waiting, for obedience, for loyalty, for a decision. But this time, her voice was her own. She took a breath, steady and sure. "You can't trade me anymore," she said to her father. Then she turned to Julian, her voice unwavering, eyes no longer afraid. "And neither can you." Silence, absolute and deafening. And then Ava walked past the boardroom, past both men. No one stopped her. For the first time in her life, no one could. Julian searched everywhere. She hadn't taken much when she left, just a coat, her phone, and her silence. But she had once told him, late one night when sleep refused to come, about a place she always went when the world felt too loud. A small lavender garden hidden on the outskirts of Queens, tucked between an old cathedral and a crumbling brick library. He went there, and the moment he stepped into the quiet, fragrant field, the noise in his mind finally ceased. The sun was dipping low on the horizon, casting golden light over the sea of violet blooms. And there she was, Ava, standing alone among the lavender, the breeze toying with strands of her dark hair. She looked unreal, untouchable, like a memory he wasn't sure he deserved to keep. He didn't speak, not at first, but she felt him. She didn't turn, didn't flinch, only murmured softly, "Why did you come?" Julian's voice, when it came, was rougher than he intended. "Because you're not a transaction. You're not a contract. You're the only thing I can't afford to lose." Ava let out a soft, almost disbelieving laugh, not cruel, but thoughtful. She finally turned to him, her eyes no longer filled with fear, but something far more dangerous, understanding. "Then prove it," she said simply. He didn't ask what she meant. He knew. She didn't want grand gestures. She didn't want apologies wrapped in roses or promises whispered in penthouses. She wanted truth, raw and human. She wanted a man, not a monster. And for the first time, Julian realized maybe she wasn't the only one learning how to be free. The townhouse stood still in the dusky light, its windows glowing like watchful eyes. Ava stepped from the car, pausing at the edge of the marble steps. She didn't look back. Julian followed her in silence, every breath a prayer he didn't know how to say. When she reached the front door, she hesitated, not because she was unsure of her path, but because she needed to know if he was. She turned slightly, her voice soft but edged with steel. "Do you think bringing me back means you get to keep me?" Julian froze. The truth pressed against his ribs like glass. No deal, no contract, no title could hold her anymore. She wasn't his to own. She was hers, and he was about to lose her. Before she could step inside, he dropped to his knees. Right there, on the cold stone, before the woman he had once claimed without permission and now begged without pride. "Don't go," he whispered. His voice cracked, raw and naked. "I don't know how to love you the way you deserve, Ava. No one ever showed me how. But I swear, when you walked away, the world tilted, and I haven't stood straight since." Ava froze. The man who had never bent for anyone now knelt in front of her, trembling, eyes wide open, walls stripped bare. She knelt too, not out of pity, but because he had finally met her where she was. Her hand brushed his cheek. Her words were quiet, but unshakable. "If you want me, Julian, then love me like I'm free, not something you won." And with that, something shattered, not between them, but within them. The next morning, the sound of tires crunching on gravel pulled Ava to the window. 3 sleek black cars rolled through the iron gates of the Blackwell estate. Her father's lawyers, dressed in sharp suits and tighter intentions, stepped out, briefcases in hand, ready to reclaim what they believed was still theirs. Julian stood beside her, silent, his jaw clenched, shoulders tight with quiet rage. But he didn't move. He didn't speak. Ava touched his arm gently. "I'll handle it," she said. He looked at her not as a shield, not as a savior, but as a woman capable of her own fight. Outside, the lawyers waited. "Miss Whitmore," one began, tone clipped, "your father has arranged for full annulment. If you come with us, this marriage can be dissolved immediately." Ava didn't flinch. She looked at them, then at Julian. He didn't plead. He didn't beg. He simply stood there, uncertain, afraid, exposed. Avo had once been treated like an object, but not today. And finally, she spoke. "I choose to stay." The silence was complete. One of the lawyers shifted, another cleared his throat, but no one argued. Because no one could. She had made her choice, not as a daughter, not as a pawn, not as a possession, but as Ava. And when Julian pulled her into his arms, he didn't kiss her like a man who had won. He kissed her like a man who had learned, finally, humbly, how to love. The lavender fields were in full bloom again, just as they had been that day, the day Ava found herself. Now, 3 years later, she stood in the same place, barefoot in the grass, the scent of sun-warmed petals weaving through the air. Her dress fluttered gently in the breeze as 2 small figures raced between the rows. Luca and Lila, their 3-year-old twins, laughing as they chased butterflies and shouted each other's names like songs. Julian stood behind her, arms wrapped around her waist, his chin resting on her shoulder. He didn't speak. He never needed to, not anymore. His silence was full of trust, of presence, of a love that had grown deep and sure, like roots beneath their feet. "You ever think we'd end up here?" Ava asked, eyes still on the children. "Every day," Julian murmured. "And every day, I still can't believe it." Then, from the far edge of the field, came another voice. "Careful, Luca, not too far." Ava turned and smiled. Ethan Whitmore stood among the lavender, sleeves rolled up, a clumsy straw hat perched on his once proud head. His hands reached down just in time to catch Lila as she tumbled into his arms, her tiny fingers clutching a crushed flower. He laughed, a laugh Ava hadn't heard since childhood, the real kind, the kind that came from somewhere unguarded. It had taken time. After the day she chose to stay, Ethan hadn't come right away. It took months before the call came, and when it did, he hadn't asked for forgiveness. He'd simply said, "I don't know if I still deserve to be your father, Ava, but I'd like to try." He did more than try. He became grandpa, with flour on his nose from baking muffins with Lila, with grass stains on his knees from helping Luca build castles out of sticks and stones. He never missed a birthday, never forgot a hug, and never once tried to make decisions for her again. Ava walked over to him now, watching as Lila proudly placed a half-broken flower crown on his head. Ethan chuckled, adjusting it like it was a king's crown. "You look ridiculous," Ava teased, laughing. "Good," he said, eyes twinkling. "About time someone else got to wear the title." Julian joined them, taking Ava's hand, their fingers laced together, simple and familiar. "Thank you," Ethan said quietly, meeting their eyes, "for letting me be part of this, for letting me make it right." Ava squeezed his hand. "You don't have to thank us," she whispered. "Your family, that's all that matters." Ethan sat cross-legged on the grass as the twins climbed into his lap, their arms thrown around his neck with sticky, sun-warmed joy. "Tell us a story, Grandpa," Luca shouted, bouncing excitedly. Ethan blinked, clearly overwhelmed for a moment, then looked up at Ava for help. She smiled. "Tell them the one about the Lavender King." He chuckled, drawing both children close. "All right then. Once upon a time, there was a grumpy old man who thought he'd lost everything, until 2 tiny troublemakers reminded him how to live again." Lila gasped, already giggling. "That's you?" Ethan laughed, truly laughed, and for a moment, he didn't look like a fallen mogul or even a father seeking redemption. He looked like a man who had finally come home. As the sun dipped lower, casting everything in a golden, lavender-hued glow, the 3 adults sat in the grass, watching the twins play, free, fearless, full of life. From ashes, they had built something lasting. Not just love, not just forgiveness, but a legacy born from pain, reshaped by choice. And finally, by freedom. And for the first time in forever, everything felt whole.